Welcome to the Green Wasp Removal YouTube channel. This is part 9 of the Polistes Dominula European Paper Wasp Nest Development Series, documenting a complete season for this nest from the time it was discovered in May of 22 through November of 22. For the best viewing experience, you may want to check out our YouTube channel playlist to look at all the previous parts of this series prior to watching this particular section of the series. We also recommend you set your viewing settings on YouTube to the highest image quality possible, otherwise YouTube's default setting is often the lowest quality image. To set YouTube image quality, click on the gear icon, then the quality setting, and then choose the highest setting you can get, 720, 1080p, whatever it is. Let's begin with a 5-minute preview of this series. This video was shot in the USA, in the state of Indiana, and North America. In this series, we show you the entire life cycle of a European paper wasp colony. That's Polistes Dominula, from the time the nest was discovered in May of 22 with about a dozen cells on it, built by these two co-foundresses you see here, all the way through midsummer when it peaked in size with over 200 cells built on the nest, till the end of the nest life cycle in October-November of 2022, when it wound down and the population died off and flew off to mate. We'll show you the cell count that were visible during each of the growth stages it went through. It was fun to document how fast they were building out this nest. We'll show you all the drama these two co-foundress queens went through as they defended their nest from predators of all sorts that wanted to eat their eggs or larvae or parasitize their nest. We watched them fight off spiders and mites and ants and parasitic insects. The ants in particular were very aggressive and they kept attacking the nest. You'll see this ant crawled right into one of the cells and tried to eat one of the eggs right there. The wasp turns around, sets off her alarm buzzing wings, and she grabs it by the leg and throws it right out of there. This was a very common occurrence. It was a daily thing, having to fight for their nest, fight for their territory. We couldn't help but be impressed at the number of times they used their wasp judo, just grabbing the leg or the antenna of the invader and just chucking it off the nest. There were parasitic wasps coming at them. They were always on alert and vigilant. They fought off mites and they fought off other types of insects that attempted to live in or around the nest. There's a whole related ecosystem of insects that target wasp nests and wasp larvae. We'll show you what it looks like when the wasp queens lay eggs inside the cells, which is what you see here. We'll show you all the life stages inside the nest, from the eggs to the newly hatched larva, to the mature larva, all the way through to the pupating larvae that become adult wasps when they chew their way out of the cell after pupation. And we'll also show you what it looks like when the pupating wasps, who have developed through the egg and larva stage, are born and chew their way out of the pupating silk caps that they cover their cells with. And we'll show you the process of how they go out to forage for wood fiber, which they collect off of aged wood, and they fly it back to the nest, where they will inspect the nest and decide which cell they want to work on, and they'll build each cell one at a time, and they'll maintain any that need repair with that material. We'll also show you how they bring back insect protein that they hunt in the wild, they share it with each other, and they malaxate it, which means they chew it up into a fine pulp, and they use that food to feed their larvae. And we'll show you that process in detail. You don't have to watch a wasp colony very long to find out what good biological control agents they are, reducing populations of insects around your property. Unfortunately, with invasive species, this goes both ways. It can be damaging to the local ecosystem if they're reducing the amount of resources available to our native wasps, who rely basically on the same insect population to feed their larvae. We'll show you how they bring nectar back and create a honey-like substance for food. They also bring back water, and they attach droplets to the cell walls to hydrate the nest and keep it cool. We'll show you the process of trophallaxis, which is where they engage in mouth-to-mouth exchange of fluids. You'll see how the two foundresses engage in dominance behaviors, such as here, where they're nipping at each other and headbutting each other. And you'll see as the dominance hierarchy becomes established on the nest, The alpha female will shake her abdomen like a rattlesnake, and she'll sort of nibble at the heads of the others until they drop their antenna and bow down to the queen, and that's how they maintain dominance on the nest. And we'll show you examples of that. We'll show you how later in the season the males begun to be born in the nest, and the reproductive females who are going to be queens the following season. After they hibernate, they'll go out and start colonies. So the goal of this video is to show you the complete life cycle of a Polistes Dominula nest. The European paper wasp. They're very, very common now as invasive species here in North America. You will probably see these this upcoming spring and summer. So keep an eye out for these, and we hope when you see them next, you'll know exactly how they operate. As always, we thank you for being here. We had a great time in the 6 months that we began the channel in 2022, and we hope to bring you a lot more fun content in 23. Here we'll step back in time to July of 2022. We'll catch up where we left off at the end of part 8. We start part 9, the final episode in this series on Polistes Dominula, here on July 24th of 22. In this slow motion clip, you can see it's all females on the nest right now. Probably a number of workers, possibly some of the new gynes that are the fertile females that will mate with the males and go out and hibernate for the winter. And then if they survive that hibernation period, they will wake up in the spring and start their own nest. From this angle, it's a little hard to tell if there's any larvae in the nest anymore or any eggs, but we can assume there's probably some. There's also some visible white-capped pupating cells, but not nearly as many as there were a short time ago, which indicates that probably several of them have been born now. And these were probably all reproductives. That would be males, and also gynes, which are fertile females who will go on to become queens. So at this point, probably most of the real active part of the nest season is starting to wind down a little bit compared to the peak when they were most active, had the most larvae, the most eggs. So from here on out through November, it will become the other side of that bell curve, and it will go on down into the point where the nest eventually dies off, and those that are fertile queens will leave and go into hibernation. Here we'll speed the clip up a little bit, just a little bit faster than real time. And what you see here is some of the wasps are still dipping their heads into the cells, which indicates there's larvae down there. They're probably getting drinks, doing trophallaxis with the larva exchange of fluids. The larva will feed them a little bit of the larva fluid, and they will share fluids and proteins with the larva as well. So this indicates there's some larvae there. There's just a lot less activity. We'll jump ahead a little bit to August 2nd of 2022, and here you see a cell count visible of 258 cells, which is quite large now compared to what we've seen throughout the rest of the series. There's probably more than that, but from this angle that's all we could see. We took some brief footage on this day to document what we had noticed, which is, number one, there's less physical activity on the nest. You can just see the wasps have slowed down physically. Here in August, it's hotter weather. They slow down a little bit anyway, sometimes in the heat, but in general, there's just less foraging coming and going constantly on the nest compared to a couple of weeks ago in July. You can still see some live larvae in the nest, not many in most of the cells we're looking at here. There are some, there's probably still 50 or so white-capped pupating cells that are visible. And importantly, down on the ground, or the table actually that's beneath the nest, you see the bodies of larvae that had been pulled out. These were likely pulled out of the nest and dropped away from it by the wasps themselves. There's no guarantee of that. Perhaps it was attacked by birds or something, but this behavior where they pull the larva out of the cells is not necessarily uncommon. And this also indicates that the season may be winding down. Yellow jackets and other species of wasp are also known to do this. Another reason you may see larvae pulled out of the nest is if the adult wasps believe they're parasitized. There are some cells in here that are infected with parasites. You can tell because if you look inside the cells, We'll freeze the frame here for a second. In these two cells, for example, you see the cocoons of parasitic wasps. That's what these are down inside the cells. On a normal cell like you see here, when a Polistes Dominula wasp pupates and comes out of the cell, they'll cut off the silk cap and they'll come out, and there's no cocoon left inside. And once it vacates the cell, the foundresses will lay a new egg in there, which is what you see attached to the side of this cell. So larvae in various developmental stages, including the pupation stage, will sometimes be killed by the other wasps and pulled out because they're parasitized. But they also do it at the end of the season sometimes, just because there's not enough food left to support the next generation of larvae, so it depends. Here's a look at the profile of the nest as of August 2nd, 22. You'll notice we don't see a lot of building activity happening now. Here we move ahead a couple days to August 4th, just a brief clip to take a look at the profile of the nest, check activity. Same here, not a lot of physical activity on the nest, pretty quiet. If you compare these shots to some of the earlier episodes in the series, there's a marked difference between their activity level now and what it was a couple weeks back, a couple months back. Here we jump ahead again a few days to August 7th, same thing, very quiet. Plenty of wasps on the nest, just not a lot of foraging, not a lot of coming and going. It is very hot now, it's August, so the heat does keep some of them down, maybe more than it would have at certain times of day earlier in the year. But regardless, there's quite a bit less activity. These clips are slow motion clips, but still you can tell there's really nothing coming or going. For most species of eusocial wasps, when their season winds down like this, there's fewer eggs being laid, there's less larvae in the nest, sometimes no larvae left at all eventually. And what happens at that point is the worker wasps who've been supporting the nest all season no longer have a job to do. So they'll sit on the nest and just wait to die off in the cold weather of winter. And they'll feed themselves. You'll see them out in the environment, nectaring, drinking nectar from flowers, drinking honeydew off of leaves, and they'll survive and they'll take care of themselves, but there's no activity that's related to forwarding the next generation of life. And so they will sit on the nest like this quite a bit. So you'll see them like this well into the fall, just sitting there on the nest. And often at that point, they will leave the nest in groups, and they'll go into a group hibernation scenario wherever they can find a sheltered space. And some of the gynns will survive through the hibernation and have new nests in the spring, and the rest will typically die off in the cold weather. At this time of year, they're also often less aggressive because there's no nest really to protect, no young larvae, no eggs. So if you're going to collect wasps in the field to try to overwinter them, this is a great time of year to grab them when they calm down and they just sit on the nest during the fall months. You just pop a container over the nest and capture the whole thing at once. It's pretty simple. Then you can set up a habitat for the adult wasps that have survived. Just be aware that the nest itself will be infected with parasites of all sorts. You don't want the nest in your habitat. You just want the wasps in your habitat. The nest will need to be heat treated so you kill off any parasites or other insects in it before you put it in a habitat, but you can then put it in the habitat after you heat treat it. If you're interested in that, you can check our other videos to find out how to set up a wasp habitat for the winter. Here we jump ahead to about August 13th, about a week later, and you'll see here now the same scenario really. Everyone's just parked on the nest. You see some males on the nest here, females on the nest. They're all just waiting for the season to end. We'll zero in on this male here on the top. You can tell he's male because he's got a lot more yellow on his face and on his head. And he's got a little bit of a curl at the end of his antennas, make it look sort of candy cane shaped. Males are fun because they don't sting and they're less aggressive, and so they're interesting to study. It's always fun to look at wasps and how they look back at you. They're always very aware. They look right at you and they're constantly alert when you're near the nest. Not aggressive necessarily, but alert. We'll zero in on some faces here one at a time here on the nest. You'll see males with most of the yellow face. You'll see females with more yellow and black on their faces. And none of them active. All of them just sort of parked, watching, waiting. Here we are the following day on August 14th of 22. You see even fewer wasps on the nest at this point. Some are out nectaring, getting some food for themselves. We'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. Others may have left the nest to go and mate. Typically from around this time of the year, you'll start seeing fewer and fewer on the actual nest. You'll notice here there's fewer and fewer white silk caps. That shows you that there's less pupation happening. Those that are remaining may or may not still be alive in their cells. They may be parasitized or they may have died through the process. If you look inside a lot of the cells, we no longer see a lot of living larvae. Most of them are just empty. We don't see a lot of eggs anymore. As you go through each of these cells, you'll either see a parasite cocoon or you'll see just an empty cell. There are still occasionally some larvae here and there, some eggs here and there, but for the most part, most of the younger generations have now been born and moved on, or been killed because there was no way to feed them this time of year. Here we jump ahead about a week to August 21st of 2022, and here we're going to show you what it looks like when the adults who are left over on the nest are out foraging, looking for nectar for themselves. Here we have a Polistes Dominula female. She's working hard trying to find some nectar to drink, and this is what adult wasps drink. Mostly honeydew and nectar, and then some fluid from larvae. Here we jump ahead to August 31st. Take a look at what's happening on the nest. Here you see a few of them out and about, peeking around the corner of the barn eaves. Here's a male. Curious what we're up to as we film the nest. So there's a couple of males on the nest, some females. So as we take a look at the nest cells, now you're going to notice no more silk caps. All the pupating wasps have either been born or have been pulled out and killed or eaten. There's a bunch of wasps still sitting on the nest. Not a lot of activity because there's nothing really in the nest to support. No eggs, no larvae left really. Whatever was going to be born in this nest has now been born. So far it had a pretty good run. Plenty of healthy wasps were born from this nest. Here we see a male on the left, two females on the right. We'll transition back to field audio for a minute here.
What's up, guys? Just chilling today.
Here we jump ahead about a month to September 26th of 22. As you can see, there's still adult wasps on the nest. You can still see a couple of males, a couple of females, but the population has definitely declined, and most of them are no longer on the nest. No visible larvae or eggs, as far as we can see. Here we see a parasitic wasp cocoon inside one of the cells. You can tell the cocoon is hatched out because there's a hole in the parasitic wasp cocoon. That means the parasitic wasp grew up from a larva, ate the larva of the other Polistes Dominula wasp that had been in there, and then chewed its way out, and that parasitic wasp is no longer in there now. If you're interested in learning more about parasitic wasps, you can watch some of our other nest examination videos. We do forensic analysis on some nests, and you'll be able to see what parasitic wasp cocoons are, what their larvae look like, how big they are compared to some other wasps that they parasitize. That's available in our other videos if you want to look them up. Here we jump forward again about another month to October 22nd of 2022. And now we see only 2 wasps left on this nest. Looks like one male on the left and a female on the right. And there does not appear to be any life in the nest otherwise. Eggs, larvae, long gone. This time of year the weather is just starting to cool down, and most of those who were reproductives, males and gynes that are females that are fertile, have moved on to mate. Others have died off. Others have moved out into groupings of hibernating wasps. Sometimes they go out in groups to do that. But now most of them are no longer on the nest. Here we see another female has joined them, so there's still a few out there. It was a breezy day on this day. You can hear the dried, fallen leaves blowing around. If we look closely in the cells here, no sign of life at all. There's a few old parasitic wasp cocoons. Otherwise, nobody's home. The place is empty. Here we jump ahead to November 2nd of 2022, about 10 days later or so, give or take, and no longer any sign of life at all. No adult wasps on the nest, no life inside the nest. So this appears to be the end of the road for this particular nest. We went back one more time a couple days later on November 4th, see if we could find any stragglers, but nothing there, no sign of life. Except for some other type of insect had crawled into one of the cells you can see there on the left. So here's a little montage of the still shots of the nest growth from May 10th of 22 through November 4th of 22. 6 months of development on a Polistes Dominula nest, the European paper wasp. We hope you've enjoyed the series. It was a lot of fun to shoot this series and to document it for you. There'll be plenty more content coming up in 2023. We'll be doing some more series with different species of wasps. We'll also be doing removal videos as usual in the warm months of the year as we remove various wasp nests from clients' residences and buildings and trees and yards. You can ride along with us for all of that coming up this year. We sure appreciate you being here with us for this series and throughout the last several months. We launched our channel in June of 22. We're coming up on our first year here this summer. It's been a blast. Thank you very much. If you've enjoyed our content, please stick around this year. Like, subscribe, comment, share, do all those things that will help this channel grow and allow us to continue bringing content like this to you. If you have anything you'd like to say about this particular series, please drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. As always, thanks again for being here. Have a good one. And that brings an end to our 9-part series on Polistes Dominula, the European paper wasp. We hope you've learned a lot and had fun watching. We sure had fun making it for you. Stay tuned, and we'll see you soon.